A baggage handler kneels to help a quiet child eat lunch. 3 hours later, he's in the middle of a millionaire's family secret. The smell of jet fuel and pretzels hung in the air like a memory no one quite wanted to claim. It was just past noon, and the hustle of Terminal C buzzed with rolling suitcases, delayed announcements, and tired conversations. But near Gate 29, time seemed to pause. Charlie Meadows, 62, leaned against his cart, the orange vest across his chest, faded from years of wear. He'd worked this airport for nearly 2 decades, a strong back, quiet mouth, and eyes that missed nothing. He didn't talk much. He didn't have to. Charlie knew the rhythm of the place, the heartbreaks, the reunions, the long waits. He knew how people looked when they were lost, even if they didn't say a word. That's when he saw the boy, alone, slumped in a wheelchair too big for his small frame, maybe 8, 9 years old, a white blanket draped across his legs, his sneakers clean but unlaced. His hands trembled slightly as he tried to bring a wrapped sandwich to his mouth, missing again and again until the sandwich slipped to the floor. No one stopped, not a single person. Charlie walked over, slow and careful, like you do with frightened birds or memories that hurt too much. "Hey, buddy," he said, crouching to eye level. "You hungry?" The boy didn't answer. His big eyes, hazel, almost gold, flicked up, then away. There was no parent nearby, no tag, no travel escort. Just a wheelchair, and a silence that spoke louder than any overhead announcement. Charlie looked at the sandwich on the floor, then at the boy's hands, which now rested, defeated, on the tray before him. "You mind if I sit a while?" Charlie asked gently. The boy didn't move, but his eyes filled, not with fear, but something softer. Relief, maybe. Charlie pulled a half-wrapped turkey sandwich from his own lunch bag, still warm from the employee microwave downstairs. "I've got this one," he said, "extra mustard, don't tell anyone." He unwrapped it slowly, tore it into small bites, and fed the boy, carefully, respectfully. The boy chewed with effort, nodding once after each bite, like it was part of a quiet agreement between them. "Name's Charlie," the man said after a while. "And you?" No answer. The boy looked at the floor, then at his lap. He reached into the blanket folds and pulled out a small stuffed dog, worn but clearly loved. He held it up, pointing to the faded collar. "Benny." Charlie smiled. "Well, Benny," he said, "you've got a good kid with you." They sat together for nearly 40 minutes. Charlie told stories, half true, half made up, about suitcases that traveled more than their owners and flights that disappeared only to reappear in Paris 2 weeks later. The boy never laughed, but he listened, eyes locked on Charlie's weathered face. It was the quiet that struck Charlie the most. Not just the boy's silence, but how no one else had even noticed, in a place where people flew across the world to see someone they loved. This boy sat alone, invisible. When the sandwich was gone, Charlie wiped the boy's hands gently with a napkin. "Someone's gonna come for you," he said softly, "and until they do, you've got me." That's when he noticed it, a flicker of gold beneath the boy's sleeve, a bracelet, elegant, out of place. He leaned closer, careful not to startle. The bracelet was thin, delicate, and engraved, a name, and as Charlie read it, something stirred in the back of his mind. He had heard that name before. The cafeteria noise in the terminal had faded into a kind of soft static around Gate 29. Charlie had managed to find an old maintenance stool, probably meant for a janitor, not a baggage handler, and set it beside the boy's wheelchair like a makeshift kitchen table. In a world of constant departure, they had carved out a pocket of stillness. Every few bites, Charlie would glance over at the boy to check if he was okay, and every time the boy, still silent, would meet his eyes for just a second, then quickly look away. It wasn't fear. It was something else, something quieter. like the boy was still deciding whether the world was safe again. Charlie knew that look. He had seen it in his daughter's eyes once, a long time ago, after the divorce. The sandwich was gone, but Charlie wasn't ready to leave. Not yet. You know, he said, leaning back, most folks in here got somewhere to be, flights to catch, meetings to make, families waiting on the other side of that security checkpoint. He paused, but every now and then someone gets stuck. No plan, no direction, just here. The boy shifted slightly, still listening. Charlie pulled a small juice box from his lunch bag, orange, with a cartoon turtle on it. The boy looked at it for a long second before accepting it with a hesitant nod. Charlie poked the straw in for him, careful not to make a mess. "What about you?" Charlie asked gently. "You waiting on someone?" No answer, just a slow sip through the straw. It was hard to tell whether the boy was processing the question, ignoring it, or simply couldn't speak. Charlie didn't push. He knew better than to force stories out of people who carried heavy ones. Sometimes silence was its own kind of answer. But Charlie's eyes kept drifting back to the bracelet. It was unmistakable now, delicate gold, engraved with letters so fine they looked like cursive spun from sunlight. The name read Milo A. Rothschild. Rothschild. That name meant something. Charlie had moved bags for hundreds of people over the years, but that name had stuck out once. A man, loud, well-dressed, always on the phone, the kind of traveler who snapped his fingers instead of saying please. Charlie's brow furrowed. He remembered the man arguing with someone at the check-in counter just a few days earlier, complaining about custody paperwork, about special needs, about this can't happen again. And now, here was this boy, alone, no guardian, no tag, no explanation. Charlie reached for his phone, then paused. He looked at the boy again. Milo, if the bracelet was right. The boy's eyes were glassy now, not from fear, but from something closer to trust. A slow-building kind of safety. Charlie didn't want to scare him. He didn't want to break whatever fragile peace had settled between them. Instead, he pulled out a folded napkin and a pen from his lunch sack. "Can you write?" he asked softly. Milo stared at the napkin for a moment. Then, with shaky hands, he took the pen and began to draw. Not words, just shapes. A sun, a plane, a heart, and then a string of numbers. Charlie stared at them. A phone number. He looked up, heart skipping a beat. "Is this someone I should call?" Milo nodded just once. His hand trembled slightly as he set the pen down. Charlie didn't wait. He stepped a few feet away, dialed the number with thick, calloused fingers. It rang once, then twice, and then, "Hello?" The voice on the other end was clipped, urgent. Charlie's chest tightened. "I'm with a boy," he said slowly. "Milo. I think he might be your son." There was silence, then a gasp. "Where is he?" The voice cracked. "Is he okay? I've been trying to reach security. I thought..." Charlie turned to look at Milo, who now clutched the stuffed dog tightly in his lap. "He's okay," Charlie said gently, "but you'd better get here fast." Charlie ended the call and slipped the phone into his pocket, his heartbeat still racing. The man on the other end hadn't said much, just a name, a few broken words, and a frantic, "I'm on my way." But the way he'd said "my son" had caught in Charlie's chest. He returned to the bench by gate 29, where Milo sat with his little stuffed dog gripped tightly, as if it were the only thing holding him to the earth. His orange juice was finished. His hands were folded neatly in his lap now, like a child at a church pew. Too still, too quiet. Charlie lowered himself back onto the stool and leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "All right, partner," he said, voice soft. "Help's on the way." "You did good." Milo gave a faint smile, more in the eyes than the lips. That same distant look, the one of someone who wanted to speak but had learned long ago not to expect anyone to listen. Charlie glanced around. Still no sign of security, no staff checking in. How was it possible that a child with a disability, had been sitting alone for so long in the middle of a busy airport, and no one had noticed? He sighed, pulling out his thermos and offering Milo a sip of warm tea. The boy took a tiny sip, blinked twice, and let out a soft exhale. It was the closest thing to a thank you Charlie had ever seen without words, but questions kept hammering at Charlie's mind. Why was he alone? Why hadn't airport staff intervened? Where had he come from? And who had let this happen? Charlie looked again at the bracelet. Milo A. Rothschild. It was engraved in fine script, unmistakable, the kind of thing you don't buy at a mall kiosk. Custom. Precious. And then Charlie remembered something else. A few days ago, a private jet had landed, one of those chartered Gulfstreams with tinted windows and staff in black uniforms. There had been a man pacing the tarmac, shouting into a phone, something about custody paperwork and a care specialist who bailed. The ground crew had whispered the man's name, Rothschild. Charlie had assumed it was just another rich man making noise. But now the story felt different. The silence between him and Milo deepened, but it wasn't empty. It was heavy, full of things neither of them could say. Charlie didn't ask more questions. He just watched people walk by, business travelers, couples, military families, none of them noticing the boy in the wheelchair or the man in the faded vest sitting beside him like a quiet sentinel. That's when a woman in a blazer approached. Airline employee, early 30s, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning the seating area. Charlie stiffened. "Excuse me, sir," she said, glancing at him, then at Milo. "Is this your child?" Charlie shook his head. "No, ma'am. He was here alone." The woman frowned. "We were alerted about an unaccompanied minor, but there was no record of him in our system. No travel documents, nothing." Charlie's brow furrowed. "He has a bracelet," he said. "Name engraved. He gave me a number. I called. His father's on the way." The woman looked skeptical. She crouched down to Milo's level. "Hi there, sweetie. Can you tell me your name?" Milo turned his face away, burying it in the stuffed dog's soft fur. Charlie felt a wave of protectiveness rise in his chest. "He's been through a lot," he said firmly. "Give him space." The woman sighed. "We'll need to notify airport security." Charlie stood. "He doesn't need security. He needs his father." A long silence passed. The woman studied Charlie, the calluses on his hands, the tired eyes, the sincerity etched deep into his weathered face. She nodded once, slowly. "I'll make a note," she said, "but you stay with him. Please." Charlie sat back down, relief washing over him like warm sun. He glanced at Milo, who was now looking up at him, his eyes wide and wet. Charlie smiled. "Told you. We got this." Milo leaned sideways just a little, resting his head softly against Charlie's arm. It was the kind of gesture that said more than 1,000 words ever could. The bracelet gleamed faintly in the soft light of the terminal. A thin band of gold that looked far too delicate for the wrist of a child. It peeked out every time Milo shifted or reached for his stuffed dog. Charlie couldn't stop glancing at it. He didn't need to read the name again. It was burned into his memory now. Milo A. Rothschild. Something about that name stirred old headlines and distant gossip from late-night TV chatter. A wealthy family, perhaps. East Coast. Maybe involved in finance. Maybe real estate. Charlie didn't know the details. Only that Rothschild wasn't the kind of name that showed up on cheap luggage tags or sandwich wrappers. And yet here was Milo, alone, disoriented, sitting beside a man in an orange vest who made his living hauling bags for people who barely said thank you. Charlie leaned back slightly, Watching the boy out of the corner of his eye, Milo was tracing shapes with his finger on the armrest of the wheelchair. Circles, clouds, maybe birds. He moved with quiet concentration, the kind of focus kids have when they're trying not to cry. Charlie didn't interrupt, he just let the silence breathe. But inside, questions gnawed at him. Where had this child come from? Why had no one reported him missing sooner? And why had a name like Rothschild not set off alarms the moment he was spotted alone? The woman from earlier had disappeared down the terminal, presumably to contact airport management or someone higher up. But there was still no security presence, no loudspeakers, no frantic search party. Just a few concerned glances and the ticking of the large clock mounted over the gate. Then Milo shifted, pushing his sleeve up just enough for Charlie to see something new. Below the bracelet on the inside of his wrist was a faint mark, a scar, thin, pale, almost surgical. Charlie's stomach turned. He recognized that kind of scar. His daughter had one too, from a medical procedure when she was little. It wasn't something you got from falling off a bike or scraping a wall. This child had been through something. He leaned forward carefully. "Milo," he said softly, "can I ask you something?" The boy looked up, blinking slowly. "You don't have to say anything. Just nod if it's yes, shake if it's no." Milo nodded once, cautious. "Are you okay? I mean, does anything hurt?" Milo shook his head. "Good. That's good." Charlie paused. "Do you live here? In this city?" The boy hesitated, then shook his head again. Charlie's eyes narrowed. "Were you supposed to be on a plane?" A long pause. Then a tiny nod. Charlie exhaled, rubbing his face with one hand. "Okay, so something went wrong." Milo just looked down again, staring at his shoes. Charlie felt the weight of the moment settle over him like heavy fog. This wasn't just a case of a kid wandering off. This was something else. Something deeper, something broken. His mind went back to the man on the phone, the voice that had cracked with panic and guilt. "Is he okay?" he'd asked. "I've been trying to reach security." It didn't add up. A father with that kind of money, that kind of influence, how could he lose track of his own son? Unless he hadn't meant to. Charlie stood up slowly and walked a few feet toward the windows. Outside, planes moved across the tarmac like quiet giants, pulling away from gates or rolling toward arrival ramps. The roar of engines was distant, muted by glass and years of routine. When he turned back, Milo was watching him, eyes sharp now, awake. Charlie returned to the bench and crouched down, looking the boy in the eye. "Whatever happened," he said gently, "it's not your fault." He didn't know why he said it. Maybe instinct, maybe experience. But the moment the words left his lips, something shifted in Milo's face. His mouth twitched, and for the first time a sound came out, faint, like a breeze. "Charlie." The man froze. Milo had spoken. Charlie blinked. "What did you say?" The boy hesitated, then repeated, "Charlie." It wasn't a question, it wasn't a guess, it was recognition. Charlie's heart pounded in his chest. "Have we met before?" he asked, his voice suddenly hoarse. Milo didn't answer, but he smiled. The smile on Milo's face didn't last long, but it hit Charlie like a punch to the chest. There was something ancient in it, something that didn't belong on the face of a child. Recognition, yes, but also sorrow. A look Charlie had seen only once before, in a hospital room over a decade ago. He sat back slowly, trying to keep his face calm. "Milo," he said gently, "how do you know my name?" But the boy had already turned his eyes away, retreating once again into the quiet world he carried with him like a shield. Charlie didn't press. He knew when to wait. Instead, he let his thoughts drift. Dangerous territory these days. He'd worked at the airport for nearly 20 years, but he hadn't always been hauling bags. Back in his 30s, he'd done part-time shifts as a tarmac marshal, guiding private jets and VIP arrivals. It was decent money, though the people, well, they were mostly forgettable, except for one man. It had been a hot July afternoon, a private Gulfstream had landed unannounced, and a tall, sharp-suited man had stepped off, barking orders into a Bluetooth headset. His voice was tight with anger, clipped with control. Charlie remembered that man arguing loudly with a woman through his phone. Something about court papers, about unfit parenting, about a child with a diagnosis he couldn't accept. "I'm not raising a vegetable," the man had shouted, unaware or uncaring that Charlie stood just 10 feet away. Those words had stayed with Charlie, long after the plane had left, long after the noise had faded. He had never forgotten them. And now, sitting beside a quiet boy in a wheelchair, staring at a gold bracelet engraved with the name Milo A. Rothschild, Charlie felt that memory twist in his gut like bad weather coming. Could it be the same man? He needed answers. Not just for himself, but for this boy who had been abandoned, intentionally or not, by someone who was supposed to protect him. Just then, a commotion rose near the far end of the terminal. Charlie turned to look. A man was pushing through the crowd, fast. He wore a tailored jacket, expensive shoes, and desperation on his face. His graying hair was slicked back, his eyes wide and red-rimmed. Charlie recognized him instantly. It was the man from the tarmac all those years ago. Older now, more tired, but unmistakable. Milo saw him too, and something in his body went rigid. "Dad," the boy whispered. Charlie stood, his protective instinct rising. The man spotted them. His face broke, somewhere between relief and guilt, as he ran forward. "Milo!" he cried out. "Oh God, Milo!" He dropped to his knees beside the wheelchair, reaching for the boy's hands. But Milo pulled back slightly, uncertain. The man looked up at Charlie, breathless. You found him. He wandered off. I was on a call with the doctors, and when I turned around, he was gone. I've been going out of my mind." Charlie didn't say anything. Not yet. "I'm Victor," the man said quickly. "Victor Rothschild. This is my son, Milo. He has a condition. He doesn't always respond. He can't travel alone, and the nurse who was supposed to accompany us, she never showed. It was a mess, but I never meant—" Charlie held up a hand. He didn't want excuses. He wanted truth. "Does he remember me?" Charlie asked, his voice low. "He said my name." Victor blinked, startled. "He remembers faces, sounds, sometimes things from a long time ago. I don't know how." Charlie looked down at the boy. "You left him once," he said quietly. "Didn't you?" Victor's face fell. "I did," he whispered. "I was scared. I couldn't handle the diagnosis. I didn't think I was strong enough. His mother, she did everything. And then she passed away last year. Cancer. Suddenly it was just me. I thought I could fix it all by giving him the best care, the best tutors, the best everything." He shook his head. "But I've never been able to look him in the eye." Charlie nodded slowly, a heavy silence passing between them. Victor reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a checkbook. "Let me do something," he said. "You saved him. You stayed when no one else did. Whatever you need, name it." Charlie looked at the checkbook, and then at Milo. "No," he said. Victor's brow furrowed. "No?" Charlie stepped closer to Milo, resting a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. "Keep your money," he said, "but keep your son too." Victor was still kneeling beside his son when the sharp crackle of a radio broke the moment. "A Gate 29, report of an unattended minor with civilian interference." Charlie didn't even have to turn around. He knew that tone, the clipped voice, the weight of suspicion behind those words. He'd heard it before, directed at people who didn't look like they belonged in certain places. 2 uniformed security officers were already making their way down the terminal aisle, shoulders squared, hands brushing the radios on their hips. Behind them, the airline employee with the clipboard, the one who had spoken with Charlie earlier, trailed nervously, her expression unreadable. Victor stood up quickly, stepping forward with authority. "It's all right," he said, voice low but firm. "There's been a misunderstanding. This man didn't do anything wrong." One of the officers held up a hand. "Sir, step aside. We'll ask the questions." Charlie didn't flinch as they approached. The taller officer narrowed his eyes. "Name?" "Charlie Meadows," he said calmly, keeping his hands visible, voice steady. The second officer pulled out a notepad. "And your relationship to the child?" Charlie looked at Milo, then back at the officer. "None. I found him alone. I stayed with him. I fed him. I called the number he gave me. That's his father," he added, nodding toward Victor. The first officer looked at Victor. "Can you confirm that, sir?" Victor stepped forward again, his voice cracking slightly. "Yes, it's true. I was delayed. There was a lapse in care. Not this man's fault. He took care of my son when no one else did." The officers glanced at each other. Doubt lingered in their posture. "And the child didn't speak at all?" one of them asked. "He said my name," Charlie replied. "That's all." The younger officer raised an eyebrow. "That's unusual considering his condition. Are you sure you didn't know him before?" "I didn't," Charlie said, though the words tasted strange now. "But somehow he knew me." The silence that followed was thick with tension. Then Milo made a sound, soft but clear. "Charlie," he said again, barely above a whisper. Both officers turned, startled. Victor crouched beside his son. "It's okay, Milo. You're safe now." But Milo didn't look at his father. He was looking at Charlie. The taller officer stepped back slightly, re-evaluating. His tone softened. "All right. Let's run some ID and confirm the report. Just a formality." Charlie handed over his badge. It wasn't new. The edges were worn, but his name was clear. His history would speak for itself. The officers stepped aside to radio it in. Victor turned toward Charlie, voice low. "I'll handle it from here. I promise you. I won't fail him again." Charlie nodded slowly. "See that you don't." There was a long pause. Then Victor did something unexpected. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a wallet, not to offer money, but to retrieve a photo. A small, worn snapshot. A woman holding a baby wrapped in blue. She had kind eyes and a smile that reminded Charlie of summer mornings. "She believed he could connect," Victor said. "Even when the doctor said it was unlikely. She said he would remember people, not words or places, but hearts." He handed the photo to Charlie. "Maybe that's how he knew you." Charlie studied the picture. Then he handed it back, quietly. "I didn't do much," he said. But Victor shook his head. "You stayed." "That's everything." The security officers returned with a nod. "All clear. Thank you for your cooperation, Mr. Meadows." They left without another word. Charlie sat back down beside Milo, who had grown quieter again. "Guess this is goodbye, huh?" he said gently. Milo didn't answer. Victor approached, holding the handles of the wheelchair. But just before he turned to leave, Milo did something unexpected. He reached out, slow, unsure, and touched Charlie's hand. Held it, just for a second, then let go. No words, no smile, just connection. It was after Victor had wheeled Milo away, surrounded now by airline staff and a pair of private security agents, that Charlie finally felt the exhaustion settle into his bones. He stood still, staring at the now empty bench by gate 29, the ghost of the boy's hand still warm against his own. Passengers bustled around him, oblivious. Flights called out over the PA system. Life moved on, as airports always forced it to. But something in Charlie refused to move. He sat down heavily on the same bench where Milo had sat, where their strange, silent bond had formed. A janitor passed by and gave him a nod. Charlie barely noticed. Then his phone buzzed. Unknown number. Charlie's instincts flared. He almost let it go to voicemail, but something told him to answer. He pressed the green button and held the phone to his ear. Hello? The voice on the other end was different. Calm, precise, female. Is this Mr. Charles Meadows? Charlie straightened. Speaking. This is Dr. Eliza Morgan. I'm a child neurologist based in Boston. I've been working with Milo Rothschild since he was 3. Charlie didn't speak, but his grip on the phone tightened. I believe you met him today, she continued. His father called me as soon as he had him back. He told me what happened and I wanted to speak with you personally. Charlie swallowed. Is he okay? There was a pause. Yes, she said, but there's something you should know. Milo doesn't speak often. He rarely engages, even with people he sees daily. But today, he spoke your name. I noticed, Charlie said softly. Dr. Morgan's voice grew more curious. Has he met you before? Not that I know of. Another pause. Mr. Meadows. This might sound strange, but Milo's mother kept journals. She documented his progress, his behaviors, things that caught his attention. After she passed, his father gave me access to them. Charlie waited. There was an entry from 5 years ago. Milo was only 3. She wrote about a man they passed at an airport. Someone who knelt to tie Milo's shoe when it came undone on the way to the gate. She said it was the only time that week Milo had smiled. Charlie felt his chest tighten. She described the man, the doctor went on, an older gentleman, African-American, wearing an orange vest. Name tag read, Charlie. He closed his eyes. I remember that day, he said. She said Milo wouldn't stop pointing back toward you as they walked away. You must have made an impression, one he remembered, even through his condition. Charlie leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hand over his mouth. I didn't do anything, he murmured. Just tied his shoe. Sometimes, Dr. Morgan said gently, that's everything. There was silence between them for a moment. Then, his father would like to invite you to visit them, Milo asked. He doesn't speak much, but he signed Charlie repeatedly after they got home. Would you consider it? Charlie stared ahead, lost in the noise of rolling suitcases and the echoes of a connection forged in silence. Yes, he said finally. Tell him I'll come. Dr. Morgan thanked him and ended the call. Charlie sat back, the weight in his chest shifting, not gone, but different now. He looked out across the terminal. Same chaos, same rhythm. But the world felt changed. And somewhere, a boy who barely spoke had remembered him, not for what he said, but for what he did. Victor Rothschild had never run through an airport in his life, not for a meeting, not for a flight, and certainly not for a person. But today, he ran. His Italian leather shoes pounded against the polished tile, his designer jacket flapping behind him. People turned to look. Some stepped aside. Most didn't recognize him. In the business world, he was feared, respected, calculated. But now, none of that mattered. He was just a man looking for his son. The terminal felt endless. Each gate he passed reminded him of how far he'd let things drift, how much he had buried in board meetings and polished speeches and wealth he'd convinced himself could replace the warmth of a parent's love. He reached gate 29 out of breath, throat dry, heart pounding, and then he saw him, Milo, small, quiet, wrapped in that same blanket. The stuffed dog still clutched to his chest like a lifeline. Victor froze. Charlie stood beside him, calm, grounded, the kind of presence that demanded no attention, yet somehow held the entire moment together. Victor stepped forward slowly, his voice cracked. Milo. The boy didn't react at first. Victor knelt. "It's me. I'm here now. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Milo looked up, not with tears, not with joy, but with something worse. Uncertainty. That hesitation, that flicker of doubt, sliced through Victor like glass. He reached for his son's hand, but Milo didn't move. Instead, he glanced at Charlie. Victor followed his eyes. There was a long silence. "I'm his father," Victor said, though the words felt hollow. Charlie didn't reply. He just looked at Milo, then back at Victor. "You're lucky he remembers you," Charlie said quietly. Victor's shoulders sagged. "I don't deserve that," he admitted. "I've spent more time running from him than toward him." He exhaled, broken. "When his mother died, I didn't know how to be a father. I hired specialists, therapists, nurses. I thought if I just paid for everything it would be enough, but it wasn't. He needed something I couldn't buy." Charlie nodded slowly. "Presence," he said. Victor's eyes filled. "Do you think it's too late?" Charlie crouched beside the boy again, brushing a crumb from Milo's blanket. "He remembered me from tying his shoe 5 years ago," he said softly. "You've got more than a second chance. You've got a whole life to make it right." Milo reached out slowly, not toward his father, but toward both men, one hand to each. And in that moment, Victor felt something break open inside him, a dam of guilt, grief, and longing. He didn't cry. Not then. But he nodded. "I'm not leaving again," he whispered. Charlie stood and stepped back, giving them space. Victor wrapped his arms around Milo gently, afraid to squeeze too tight. Milo leaned into it, not fully, but enough. Enough to say, "I'll give you a chance." As they turned to leave, Victor looked back. He walked up to Charlie, extended his hand. "I know money doesn't fix this," he said. "But if you ever want something more than loading bags, you let me know." Charlie shook his head. "I've already got more," he said, smiling faintly. "I've got stories." Victor didn't understand at first, but then he looked at Milo, and he nodded. He understood. Charlie returned to his post near the baggage carousel with his vest half unzipped and his mind still back at Gate 29. The airport buzzed with its usual symphony, rumbling wheels, distant gate calls, and muffled announcements. But for Charlie, everything felt quieter now. He'd seen the boy disappear down the concourse in his father's arms, the blanket folded neatly over his lap, the stuffed dog still close. That image had etched itself in Charlie's mind, like a photograph pinned to the wall of his heart. He didn't expect to see Victor again. But an hour later, as the shift changed and the sun began to dip behind the glass walls of the terminal, he did. Victor returned. No security detail, no flashy entourage. Just a man with his sleeves rolled up and something unfinished in his eyes. "Charlie," he called out, stopping near the ramp. Charlie turned slowly. "Thought you were gone." Victor gave a tired smile. "We were, but Milo, he kept saying your name, again and again. He doesn't do that, you know, not like this." Charlie nodded, unsure what to say. "I told you I wanted to help," Victor continued. "I wasn't offering charity. I was offering partnership." Charlie raised an eyebrow. Victor pulled a card from his pocket and handed it over. "I fund a foundation. Quiet, under the radar. We support programs for underrepresented kids with disabilities, families with no support. We've been wanting someone real, someone grounded, to lead a local pilot at this airport, someone who knows people like Milo, people who fall between the cracks." Charlie looked down at the card. Victor added, "You don't have to say yes, but if you ever get tired of lifting bags and want to lift people instead, there's a place for you." Charlie stared at the card for a long moment. "I'm no social worker," he said quietly. "You're better," Victor replied. "You're someone who stayed." There it was again, that word, stayed. In a world where most people kept moving, Charlie had paused, sat down, shared a sandwich, not because it was his job, because it was right. He looked out toward the terminal. "I'll think about it." Victor smiled. "That's all I ask." Before he left, he turned back once more. "One more thing," he said. "Milo, he told me something last night before bed. Just one word. He said, again, I think he wants to see you." Charlie didn't reply, but the answer was in his eyes. Later that evening, Charlie sat alone in the break room, the card still resting on the table in front of him. He stared at it, then reached for his old journal, one he hadn't opened in years. Inside were stories, notes, snippets of people he'd met in the airport, a little girl who gave him a sticker when her flight got delayed, a woman who cried quietly in the corner while writing a letter she'd never send, a soldier leaving for deployment who'd given Charlie his favorite coin. Now he added a new entry. Milo, a boy who couldn't speak but said everything. Charlie closed the journal. Sometimes life didn't need grand gestures or fancy speeches. Sometimes all it needed was someone who noticed, someone who stayed. It was almost midnight. The airport, once full of hurried steps and loud calls, had quieted to a hush. The cleaning crews moved slowly, their carts squeaking on the tile floors. The blinking lights of departure boards cast long shadows on empty seats. Charlie stood beneath the big board, eyes scanning the names of cities he'd never been to, watching planes he'd never fly. Boston, Denver, San Diego. To him, they weren't just places. They were promises, goodbyes, hellos. He sipped the last of his thermos coffee, now cold. The familiar bitter taste grounded him. Over the years, he had seen thousands pass through this building, rushing, crying, laughing, falling apart. But it was Milo he would remember the most, not for the boy's silence, but for the way he had broken it. Charlie had never needed to be noticed. He was a man of small routines, a sandwich at noon, a wave to the guy at gate 17, a pocket knife always in his sock for opening jammed luggage zippers. He wasn't flashy, he wasn't loud, but today he had been seen. Not by the crowd, not by the uniformed men who ran the airport, but by a boy who saw the world differently. A boy who remembered kindness like it was a language. Charlie had read once that people remember how you made them feel long after they forget your name. Maybe that was true, or maybe, in Milo's case, it was the opposite. Charlie took a seat by the window, resting his bag beside him. Outside, a plane lifted into the night sky, its lights blinking like a heartbeat against the darkness. He opened his journal again and added one last note beneath Milo's name. Sometimes the smallest voices carry the loudest truths. Behind him, someone cleared their throat. It was Lou, the night shift supervisor. Bald, glasses too big for his nose. "You okay, Meadows?" Charlie looked up, smiled faintly. "Yeah, just thinking." Lou grunted. "Heard you had a day." Charlie chuckled once. Something like that. Lou handed him a folded paper. "What's this?" Charlie asked. Lou shrugged. "Looks like someone filed a commendation. Said you acted with uncommon humanity. Airport board wants to talk, maybe even do a story." Charlie held the paper, unread. "I didn't do anything special," he murmured. Lou nodded. "That's what makes it special." He left Charlie alone again. Minutes passed, maybe hours. Eventually Charlie stood and walked back to the same gate where it all began. Gate 29. The janitor had mopped the floor. The bench was clean. Nothing remained. And yet, everything had changed. As he walked out into the early morning light, Charlie paused, pulled Victor's card from his pocket, dialed the number. It rang once. Then, Victor Rothschild speaking. Charlie smiled. "You said something about a program," he said. "I'd like to talk about it." Victor didn't say much, just, "Milo will be thrilled." And Charlie believed him. Because sometimes the smallest acts, like sharing a sandwich or tying a shoe or simply staying, could shift the course of someone's life. And if you're lucky, maybe your own too. And just like that, a man who was nearly invisible in his own world became unforgettable in someone else's. Charlie didn't seek recognition, and he never asked for a thank you. But his kindness echoed louder than any announcement over the airport speakers. Because what he gave wasn't just a sandwich or a seat. He gave presence. He gave dignity. How many people have we passed by in airports, on sidewalks, in life, never stopping to ask if they're okay? Now it's your turn. Have you ever witnessed or been part of an act of quiet kindness in an airport or while traveling? Share your story in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like and consider leaving a super thanks. It helps support the channel and bring more beautiful stories to life. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss another emotional journey. And if you want more stories like this, click on the video appearing now on your screen. It's one you won't forget.